Hello, my name is Ed Fortner. I'm a scientist at Aerodyne Research, and I'm going to be talking with you about an experiment called the Cloud Aerosol Interaction and Precipitation Enhancement Experiment. We conducted it last summer in India, and we flew a Beechcraft B200. This is looking at clouds and looking at seeding of clouds. Dr. Thara Prabhakaran led this study. She's at the India Institute for Tropical Meteorology in Pune. We borrowed a mini aerosol mass spectrometer from Dr. DeCarlo, formerly at Drexel University. And one of his students, Ben Werden, who's now a postdoc, also was very helpful with coming out for about a week and a half and doing measurements. I also came out to India for about a week and a half and did measurements. Hibert from Weather Modification International was there for every flight, took great flight notes, kept the thing running for the whole couple of months or so that it was out there. And then Testcorn in India also did a really good job keeping the instrument going. So I've got a picture of the mini-AMS on the left here. Particles come into the instrument, get guided into a nice beam by the inlet lens. Then they go past a chopper, which can either be in an open, chopped, or blocked position. The particles then impact an oven, which is at 600 degrees Celsius. Anything that vaporizes below 600 will flash vaporize, such as ammonium chloride, which is a common component of, or a common source of chloride in clouds. That will flash vaporize. Then the gas phase molecules at that point interact with electrons coming off the filament. They become ions and they get guided into the TOF. Now, our primary seeding component is calcium chloride. And calcium chloride has a melting point of 774, which is above 600. So we don't get the flash vaporization there. Instead, we get a slow partial vaporization, so that when you either fly out of the cloud and signals should go away right away because you just flew out of the cloud, it doesn't. It lingers because you've got stuff still coming off the heater. Alternatively, if we block the beam to measure the background in the chamber, we'll still have that coming off the heater. So this makes measuring calcium chloride difficult because that signal sticks. However, we can take advantage of that and actually use that to differentiate where our chloride is coming from. So if you look at the time series on the left here, this is from a time when we were right behind and above the seed aircraft, and it started seeding, and you can see chloride just jump up. Now this is refractory chloride, and I'm looking at the open signal here. If I were to look at the diff, you wouldn't see much because that open minus closed is a small difference. But the open really shows up well, and you can see how long it takes to come down. Comparatively speaking, HCl is a relatively quick plume there, right? Because it's not refractory. It's coming back down when we leave the cloud. On the right, I've got an instance where we went through an unseeded cloud. And there you can see that the Cl and the HCl are both going up and down quickly because they're not part of seeding, right? They're not refractory at all. They just jump up and down as we go in and out of these cloud wisps. Now, another way that we can tell seeded clouds from unseeded clouds, if the seed is this calcium chloride, is they actually use potassium as the oxidizing component to burn the flare in those flares. So you get a potassium signal with the flare. And if you look at the case where we are right behind and above the seed aircraft, obviously we see a huge potassium signal there in the time series and less of an HCl signal. And when you look at this scatter plot that I've got on the top, I'm plotting potassium versus HCl. And so again, in the case of the seeded aircraft, that's the black triangles, very high calcium relative to HCl, or potassium rather, relative to HCl. But if you look at the non-seeded case, and the potassium versus HCl is much lower. It's these red triangles. And then overall, we've got the entire data dump. All of the cloud pass data is the blue circles. And so you can see how it varies throughout the whole campaign. Now, so far I've shown you the case where we were right there, right behind the aircraft in an unseeded case. But what we would really like to do is we would like to look at these cloud passes that we did that were some distance later in time from the actual seed event. And so this slide shows a cloud pass that we did 19 minutes after the seeding and about 2.5 kilometers above the seed height. And if you look at the top right here, I'm showing some data from another instrument. This is a fast SNPS giving us cloud droplet concentration. And then I've also got vertical velocity there. That is the black dots. And I want to point out that in this particular case, we have 3 different areas where the cloud droplet concentration is elevated, or 3 different sizes. We've got one down here around 5 nanometers or 5 micrometers, another one around 15 micrometers, and then finally a third one around 25 micrometers. Now we think these 2 smaller ones at 5 and 15 are actually activity due to the seeding. And of course, we've got a lot more work to prove that, but we think that that's the case. Now, we can also look at the mini-AMS signal during this cloud pass. We have, that's in the lower right here, we have potassium jump up, we have HCl jump up, and we have chlorine, refractory chloride, jump up and then stay elevated for some time afterwards. And then if we look at our scatter plot of potassium versus HCl here, you can see the brown triangles are this seeded cloud pass, and you can see that it's kind of in between the potassium, or it's kind of in between the case where we're right behind the aircraft and the case where there's no seeding at all. Then we can look at the mass spec during the time that we were doing this cloud pass, and that's shown on the left here. And basically the organic as much is the dominant signal there, primarily CO2 and CO. We also do have chloride. Those are the 2 highest peaks, or the 2 highest species. If you look at, we also have some clear air data done on the same day, maybe about an hour later, but in the same general location. And in that case, organic again dominates, but we also have a fair amount of sulfate. So for whatever reason, we didn't have much sulfate in this particular cloud, but it was in the outside air. This is a second case. This was August 21st, and this was 40 minutes after seeding, about 1.5 kilometers above the seed height. And again, if you look at the top right there, you can see it took us about 40 seconds to make this cloud transect. And you can see how the vertical velocity changed as we made that pass. We had updrafts and downdrafts. And you can see what where the droplet concentration mode was. We definitely had a smaller mode at around 5 and a larger mode at around 20. And then if we look at the mini-AMS here, you can see that the potassium jumps up dramatically, as does the HCl. We always expect HCl to come up in a cloud pass. But the potassium comes up and trails off slightly slower, and then the refractory chloride, it comes up and stays up, right? And then if we look at the scatter plot of potassium versus HCl, again, we're sort of in between the case that is right behind the aircraft doing seeding and the case where there's no seeding at all. The orange triangles are this particular cloud pass. So in conclusion, we were able to see refractory chloride from the calcium chloride flares in cloud passes done at some later point in time from when the seeding was actually conducted. We were also able to see potassium in those same cloud passes, and those are both markers of the actual seeding process. So this information helps us basically to trace this cloud parcel. And then, of course, we have a bunch of different parameters that we're measuring so that we can, see how that cloud parcel evolves. Both, we have chemical speciation within the cloud with the mini-AMS, and of course, we also have various cloud droplet properties that we're measuring as well. In the future, we are looking into doing some lab work looking at these flares, and we're also thinking about the possibility of using different flares in the future. And here's one last look at the group. Thank you.